Great ancient wonders the world has forgotten. The star map and the sinner, enriched cut. Baghdad, 2 a.m., the Tigris glints like a black scalpel outside the National Museum's shattered skylight. Dr. Naira Sultani, once the darling of Near Eastern archaeology, now moves like a thief through the gallery she helped curate. Her reputation lies in tatters after accusing a UN-backed dig of forgery. Tonight is her last gamble at redemption, or damnation. She reaches the forbidden case, a clay tablet no larger than a dinner plate, its cuneiform inlaid with iridescent hematite that seems to pulse under the security lasers. The placard reads, Uncatalogued Artifact Number 37, Origin Disputed. Naira knows better. She's traced its chemical signature to a vanished Babylonian sect rumored to map the heavens in living blood. With trembling hands she swaps the tablet for a resin fake, but as she tucks the real piece into her satchel a sliver of hematite nicks her finger. Blood beads across the glyphs. And the symbols ignite like embers in a kiln. The gallery's motion alarms scream to life, yet Naira is frozen by the tablet's sudden warmth. A spectral chorus floods her skull, voices speaking Akkadian, Farsi, languages she's never studied. One voice, softer, almost maternal, slips through the cacophony. Sultani is the name they gave you, child. Remember the river, remember the throne. The tablet's glow fades, leaving a single crimson spiral now etched into the clay, and, impossibly, mirrored on Naira's palm. She escapes into the night as sirens converge, but the real panic blooms later, in her hotel room. A quick DNA scan on her portable sequencer, meant only to catalog residue, flags an impossible match. The tablet's trace blood is genetically identical to hers, down to mitochondrial markers. Reeling, she translates the first line with shaking stylus, to unlock the sky, the air must bleed. The chorus in her head swells again, and a final whisper cleaves through. Your true name was struck from stone, but the stars still remember. Naira slams her notebook shut, heart pounding. Whatever fate this tablet holds, it's bound to her veins, and the world's oldest map has just redrawn the borders of her identity. Glass ziggurat, shattered piece. Nubian desert, dawn. A rose-gold sun crawls over dunes that once cradled the kingdom of Kush. Naira's makeshift caravan, 2 rattling unimogs, a satellite trailer, and a generator humming like a captive hornet, has carved a lonely camp beside a half-buried stone ring the locals call Al-Sifr, the Zero. Inside a canvas command tent, ground-penetrating radar scrolls its green ghost waves. Every third sweep shows the impossible, a perfect 7-tier structure lying 40 meters below, its outline crystalline, not stone. Rafa Ortega, the team's geophysicist, whistles low. It's reflecting signal like quartz, but denser, almost, diamond. Dr. Miriam Khatib, sedimentologist, counters, no sediment displacement. Whatever's down there was grown, not built. Naira's sigil-scarred palm tingles, the spiral burns ice-cold whenever the radar pings the structure. By noon, the crew has jackhammered a narrow shaft. Hot wind funnels upward, carrying an ozone tang that prickles skin. Descending first, Naira's headlamp flashes across walls of translucent green glass, each block veined with copper filaments that hum faintly, like distant bees. On the lowest tier, a central dais supports a crystalline obelisk the size of a grand piano. Its surface is webbed with fractures that glow whenever her pulse quickens, each glow echoing the rhythm of her heartbeat. Piezoelectric lattice, Rafa mutters, running a voltmeter that instantly fries. The obelisk responds to Naira's presence, static lifts her hair, and the sigil on her palm blazes. Against every protocol, she reaches out. The moment skin meets crystal, a bass-deep chord booms through the chamber. Sand erupts topside in a kilometer-wide plume, drones capture dunes rippling like water in a bowl. Then comes the chorus, not heard but felt in bone and blood. A million scales rasping in unison beneath the Sahara, as if some gargantuan serpent were shedding its skin miles below. Seismic stations from Khartoum to Luxor light up with a magnitude 6 pulse that registers no epicenter. In the Ziggurats' heart, copper veins ignite, racing toward Naira's hand. A second sigil, twin to the first, sears itself into her wrist. She screams, yet the pain is laced with euphoria, an electric certainty that the obelisk has recognized her. Above ground, tents collapse, vehicles flip, and Miriam radios frantic Arabic, the sand is singing. Naira yanks free, the glow subsides, but the desert remains unnervingly still, no wind, no insect buzz, just the residual hum of power coiled beneath the earth. As medics bandage her blistered wrist, she notices the new sigil has formed an interlocking pattern with the old, 2 spirals entwined like double helixes. Rafa, pale, shows her the drone feed. Concentric glass rings now poke through the sand for miles, forming an enormous compass that wasn't there an hour ago, its needle pointing south-southwest, deeper into the Sahara's uncharted emptiness. Naira realizes the ziggurat was never a tomb or temple, it was a beacon, and she has just switched it on. Whatever answered from below is still rising, and the map etched in her own blood has claimed its second coordinate. The lighthouse that lures the dead. Uncharted Aegean islet, midnight. The sea is glass, the moon a broken coin drifting between clouds. Naira's research cutter, Ishera, drops anchor beside a jagged shoal that does not appear on modern charts. GPS glitches, compasses spin. Only the star map's newest coordinate, a pulsing ruby dot that surfaced after the Nubian tremor, insists this speck of rock exists at all. From the deck, the team can already see it, a lighthouse 40 meters tall, pale as bleached coral, its spiral tower seemingly carved from seamless stone. Yet up close the truth is grotesque. Each block is a section of fossilized human vertebra, interlocked like gears in a spine. Salt wind whistles through the hollows, producing a low, funereal drone that sets everyone's teeth on edge. Inside the lantern room, soot-black mirrors line the walls, arranged in a helical pattern that matches the twin sigils now branded on Naira's hand and wrist. In the center stands a cold iron brazier shaped like a cupped ribcage. Rafa records spectral EM spikes. Miriam notes the mirror's focus on the brazier like a telescope pointed inward. At 1:11 a.m., the exact time the ancient Babylonian calendar marks as Gate of Souls, the brazier ignites itself. No fuel, no spark. Violet flame coils upward, reflected 1,000 times until the lantern room becomes an endless tunnel of fire. Outside, fog materializes from nowhere, rolling over the waves like silk unspooled by unseen hands. Then come the ships. First, a trireme with sails of rotted linen, oars manned by skeletons crusted in sea salt. Behind it, a Victorian clipper, masts snapped but somehow moving against the wind. More follow, Phoenician merchantmen, a rust-eaten U-boat, even a downed World War II bomber skimming the water like a wounded gull. All are silent, all converge on the lighthouse, their hulls passing through one another like overlapping memories. Naira feels the sigils throb. The violet flame responds, twisting into the shape of a double helix. Her ears ring with that now familiar chorus of ancient voices, only tonight, one voice rises above the rest, her mother's. Dr. Parvana Rostami vanished on a dig when Naira was 12, the world presumed her dead. Now, her spectral form steps from the fog onto the catwalk, translucent yet unmistakable. Daughter, the apparition says in Persian, eyes glowing like distant quasars, the custodians want your heartbeat. They need the royal pulse to stop the engine from turning. She reaches out, fingertip passing through Naira's cheek like cool mist. Find the gear that sleeps beneath the cross of 7 domes, and trust no one who claims your blood. Rafa tries to record the encounter, his camera lens cracks from the inside. Miriam begins reciting protective verses, but her breath fogs silver and her words freeze mid-air, falling as tinkling ice. The lighthouse drone rises to a scream. The flame collapses into a single ultraviolet spark that shoots skyward, piercing the clouds. Instantly, every ghost ship veers away, drawn toward the beacon and vanishing as if swallowed by the night. Silence. The brazier is dark, the mirrors show only the team's pale reflections, except Naira's, which is missing from half the panes, as though reality can't decide if she's still alive. Back on the Ishera, the sigils have cooled to an obsidian sheen, but a new mark has appeared between them, a tiny cruciform symbol composed of 7 interlocking circles, the cross of 7 domes her mother mentioned. When Naira overlays it on the star map, a fresh coordinate flares to life, this time in the heart of Crete's ruins. The lighthouse fades behind them, its vertebral tower dissolving into sea spray as dawn approaches, leaving no proof it ever stood, save for the spectral salt prints of a mother's hand on Naira's tear-streaked face. Maze of the Clockwork Minotaur. Knossos, Crete, twilight that tastes of storm brine. The tourist crowds are long gone when Naira's team slips past the rope lines, guided by her star map's new cruciform sigil. Ancient frescoes glare in torchlight, bulls vaulting, youths dancing, queens with serpent scepters, all watching as intruders prise up a slab of flagstone rumored never to have been lifted in modern times. A rush of stale air billows out, scented with myrrh and machine oil. Hidden stairs spiral downward into the true labyrinth, a subterranean warren the myth hunters insisted was only metaphor. Every landing bears bronze inlays of concentric mazes, each ring able to rotate underfoot with a grating hiss. The floor itself is a puzzle, Miriam realizes, marking their route with ultraviolet chalk that fades the moment they turn a corner. Motion sensors die, compasses spin again. Only Naira's branded palm tingles like a dowsing rod, pulling them through junctions that rearrange the instant they pass. Walls pulse with faint magnetic fields, veins of orichalcum, legendary Atlantean alloy, throb like circuitry behind limestone. At the seventh concentric ring, the corridor yawns into a circular chamber domed by mirrored panels that tilt and click in perpetual motion, reflecting a kaleidoscope of torch flames. In the center stands a colossal bronze automaton, a bull-headed warrior 8 meters tall, joints of gilded gears, ribcage forged from interlocking labyrinth motifs. Dust coats its shoulders, yet its eyes, polished hematite, gleam with dormant intelligence. Dr. Sebastian Hale, expedition financier and self-styled antiquities savant, steps forward, hungry for footage that will resurrect his faltering media empire. Imagine the auction value, he murmurs, activating a laser scanner. The beam grazes the Minotaur's helm, and the creature inhales. Metal lungs groan awake, gears grind like distant thunder. Back away, BS. Rafa shouts, but too late. The Minotaur pivots, hooves sparking, yet, astonishingly, its gaze passes over Naira and locks onto Hale. The automaton kneels before her, lowering its axe arm in a gesture of fealty, bronze plates clicking into a new configuration that mirrors the double helix sigils on her flesh. A tremor ripples through the chamber as if the maze itself is bowing with it. Hale, incensed, swings a magnesium flare at the machine. I own this discovery, he snarls. The Minotaur's chest plates snap open like jaws, revealing a core of molten gold light. A tongue of liquid metal lashes out, branding Hale's forearm with a labyrinth tattoo that glows white-hot, then sinks beneath his skin as though devouring his flesh from the inside. He collapses, screaming, veins lighting up in a spreading fractal maze. The automaton rises, steps back, and the mirrored panels overhead rotate, projecting holographic star charts onto the floor. Lines converge on a black stone pyramid set against unfamiliar constellations, yet Rafa identifies the southern sky above Bolivia. As the image stabilizes, the labyrinth walls begin to shift, sealing exits one by one. Miriam's fading chalk marks vanish entirely. Naira realizes the Minotaur is both guardian and key, it responded to her bloodline but punished Hale's greed. She presses her sigil-marked palm to the creature's axe blade. The metal cools instantly, the maze rumbles, realigning passages to form a single, straight corridor leading back to the surface. They drag the semi-conscious Hale, his arms still smoldering with subdermal light, through the newly opened path. Behind them, the Minotaur resumes its sentinel pose, but one mirrored panel lingers a moment longer, reflecting not Naira's face, but a crown-shaped void hovering above her head, as if the maze itself recognizes a queen returned. On the moonlit ruins above, storm clouds split with thunder that echoes like distant hoofbeats. Hale's tattoo stops glowing, settling into charcoal black. The pattern is unmistakable, the same cruciform of 7 domes, but now the center dome is missing, devoured by the maze's molten kiss. Naira pockets a sliver of cooled orichalcum that flaked from the Minotaur's brand. It hums against her palm, pointing inexorably toward the Andes. The labyrinth has spoken, the next wonder awaits where midnight meets the sky, and the clockwork beast has marked both the path and the price of disobedience. Midnight Pyramid and the heart stop. Under a moon so thin it looked etched in glass, the team clawed their way up the jagged spine of Bolivia's Nevado Sajama Plateau. There, hidden in a crater of volcanic glass, rose a black stone pyramid whose facets reflected the Milky Way with such brutal accuracy it felt like staring into a negative of the universe. Every block was magnetite shot through with flecks of meteor iron, humming just above human hearing, an arrhythmic throb that seemed to tune the air itself. Inside, the corridors narrowed to a single obsidian chamber where a stone plinth hovered, literally floated, 3 centimeters above the floor. Rafa, normally the team's wisecracking geophysicist, reached out in awe. The instant his fingertips brushed the levitating slab, every flashlight guttered out. Heart monitors flatlined. Time collapsed into a vacuum-sealed hush as Rafa's pulse stopped. 3 whole minutes of clinical death while the pyramid's walls shimmered with constellations shifting at impossible speed. When he gasped back to life, the starlight snapped into a new alignment and the humming ceased. Rafa's eyes, once brown, now glowed with a pale, metallic silver. He spoke in flawless Sumerian, voice layered like 2 echoes out of sync, I am the last architect. Earth drifts, off axis by 7 breaths. Realign, or the sky will drown. His words triggered a seismic tremor that rippled through the plateau, tilting the pyramid a fraction, as if the structure itself acknowledged the warning. The team exchanged terrified glances, realizing the pyramid hadn't merely stopped Rafa's heart, it had rebooted him as its living stellar compass. Keycap 6 Colossus of Chains, expanded cut a month after Bolivia's midnight omen, the expedition regrouped at McMurdo Station, where night and day blurred into a single cobalt twilight. Rafa's eyes still gleamed silver as he pored over fresh ESA interferometry, jagged waveforms that mapped something vast and hollow beneath the Ross ice shelf. When the data resolved, everyone fell silent, a 400-meter humanoid silhouette, curled fetal beneath 2 kilometers of ancient ice. They air-dropped a mobile rig, part drill, part exospheric spectrometer, onto the pinpointed coordinates. At -47 degrees Celsius, even breaths crystallized mid-sentence. Yet as the Titan's outline sharpened on the ground-penetrating radar, the frigid air grew strangely warm, tinged with the metallic scent of ozone. Naira brushed frost from a viewport and saw it, bronze ribs, each the size of a cathedral spire, cinched around a pulsing rift in the creature's chest. The fissure glowed with molten colors, solar reds, aurora's greens, like a wound to another cosmos. "Those aren't bones," Rafa whispered in his doubled voice. "They're shackles." The ice groaned, a basso profundo that made the rig's steel skeleton shudder. Hairline fractures spider-webbed across the glacier, radiating from the colossus as if it exhaled tectonic stress. Then, with a thunderous crack, the shelf sheared downward. Shards the size of city blocks calved away, revealing a titanic bronze face half entombed in blue ice. Empty eye sockets blazed to life, projecting symbols that danced across the blizzard like burning snowflakes. Slowly, agonizingly, the colossus bent one colossal knee, its mass warping gravity enough to tilt compass needles. The motion sent a pressure wave that knocked the team to the ground. Through swirling ice dust, Naira felt the Titan's consciousness brush her mind, a pleading echo, "Lock me tighter, the breach must hold." But Dr. Elias Hale, their logistics chief, had other designs. Haunted by visions of limitless energy, he'd seeded microcharges along the drill column. While the rest scrambled to stabilize the rig, Hale keyed a silent override. Explosions rippled up the borehole like inverted lightning. Bronze links, weathered by eons, snapped, and the colossus's left arm tore free with a scream of metal against reality itself. The released limb struck the ice plane, carving a trench that steamed despite the sub-zero cold. Naira's headset filled with overlapping alarms, seismic spikes, magnetosphere anomalies, a sudden drop in cosmic ray shielding, as if the planet itself recoiled. The Titan's freed hand flexed, each finger a fortress tower, and the glowing rift in its chest flared wider, bleeding light that twisted the falling snow into spirals of liquid fire. Naira staggered toward Hale, fury mixing with dread. "You didn't just break a chain," she shouted over the rising gale, "you might have broken the sky." Above them, auroras ignited in unnatural patterns, 7 concentric spirals, eerily reminiscent of Rafa's earlier warning. And beneath the ice, the colossus began to stand. Colossus of Chains. A month after Bolivia's midnight omen, the expedition regrouped at McMurdo Station, where night and day blurred into a single cobalt twilight. Rafa's eyes still gleamed silver as he pored over fresh ESA interferometry, jagged waveforms that mapped something vast and hollow beneath the Ross ice shelf. When the data resolved, everyone fell silent, a 400-meter humanoid silhouette, curled fetal beneath 2 kilometers of ancient ice. They air-dropped a mobile rig, part drill, part exospheric spectrometer, onto the pinpointed coordinates. At -47 degrees Celsius, even breaths crystallized mid-sentence. Yet as the Titan's outline sharpened on the ground-penetrating radar, the frigid air grew strangely warm, tinged with the metallic scent of ozone. Naira brushed frost from a viewport and saw it, bronze ribs, each the size of a cathedral spire, cinched around a pulsing rift in the creature's chest. The fissure glowed with molten colors, solar reds, aurora's greens. Like a wound to another cosmos. "Those aren't bones," Rafa whispered in his doubled voice. "They're shackles." The ice groaned, a basso profundo that made the rig's steel skeleton shudder. Hairline fractures spider-webbed across the glacier, radiating from the colossus as if it exhaled tectonic stress. Then, with a thunderous crack, the shelf sheared downward. Shards the size of city blocks calved away, revealing a titanic bronze face half entombed in blue ice. Empty eye sockets blazed to life, projecting symbols that danced across the blizzard like burning snowflakes. Slowly, agonizingly, the colossus bent one colossal knee, its mass warping gravity enough to tilt compass needles. The motion sent a pressure wave that knocked the team to the ground. Through swirling ice dust, Naira felt the Titan's consciousness brush her mind, a pleading echo, "Lock me tighter, the breach must hold." But Dr. Elias Hale, their logistics chief, had other designs. Haunted by visions of limitless energy, he'd seeded microcharges along the drill column. While the rest scrambled to stabilize the rig, Hale keyed a silent override. Explosions rippled up the borehole like inverted lightning. Bronze links, weathered by eons, snapped, and the colossus's left arm tore free with a scream of metal against reality itself. The released limb struck the ice plane, carving a trench that steamed despite the sub-zero cold. Naira's headset filled with overlapping alarms, seismic spikes, magnetosphere anomalies, a sudden drop in cosmic ray shielding, as if the planet itself recoiled. The Titan's freed hand flexed, each finger a fortress tower, and the glowing rift in its chest flared wider, bleeding light that twisted the falling snow into spirals of liquid fire. Naira staggered toward Hale, fury mixing with dread. "You didn't just break a chain," she shouted over the rising gale, "you might have broken the sky." Above them, auroras ignited in unnatural patterns. 7 concentric spirals, eerily reminiscent of Rafa's earlier warning. And beneath the ice, the Colossus began to stand. The custodian coup. The makeshift war room aboard their ice-smeared research vessel thrummed with overlapping feeds, LiDAR sweeps from Bolivia, magnetometer spikes from Antarctica, and a live uplink to a Cold War spy satellite Rafa had somehow convinced to change its tasking. When all that data merged, the hollow table erupted in auroral light, a three-dimensional lattice of gears, ley lines, and planetary fault zones that slowly coalesced into the outline of a planet-sized engine girdling Earth like an invisible clockwork halo. Naira's breath hitched. Each gear corresponded to megalithic sites they'd visited, or were yet to unearth, while plasma-thin conduits linked those hubs through the mantle itself. At the model's core pulsed a crystalline sphere representing Earth's dynamo, overlaid by a countdown stuttering at -72 hours 13 minutes. The restart should have triggered 3 days ago, Rafa translated, eyes flickering silver as ancient glyphs scrolled across his retina. Every 12,000 years the engine realigns the geomagnetic field, avoiding pole-flip chaos. We're officially past deadline. Before anyone could process that, the bulkhead door hissed shut. Emergency locks clanged home. Dr. Elias Hale emerged from the shadows, trademark parka replaced by a charcoal black flight suit stitched with a sigil they'd only seen on broken temple seals, the custodian knot, 2 serpents swallowing each other's tails around a stylized planet. Hale's smile was thin as frost. "I hoped you'd piece it together without me, but time's up, literally. The custodians built this failsafe. My family has safeguarded their legacy for 40 generations." He keyed a command, the hollow engine flickered red where its actuators should spin. Problem is, firing it drains the mantle's stored torsion. Great for humanity, bad for opportunists. Screens behind him shifted to orbital views, sleek arc stations moored at Lagrange points, hulls glittering like coffins of polished chrome. Hale's voice dropped to a whisper of reverence and greed. "When the field collapses, solar radiation will do what wars and plagues never could. While the surface resets, a chosen few will watch from above, and inherit a quieter world." Lightning crawled across the ceiling sensors as Earth's magnetosphere hiccuped, proof his timetable was no bluff. Naira lunged, but Hale's palm scanner had already disabled every hatch. "You can't reboot the engine," he said, pitying. "I've decoupled the last alignment nodes. In 16 hours the polar cusps will tear wide open. By then I'll be on the Arcadia." Rafa's newly dual voice reverberated through the sealed compartment. "The architect outranks the air," he intoned, and for a heartbeat the hollow gears trembled as though awaiting his command. Hale's eyes flashed with something like fear, then hardened. He back-stepped into the evacuation lift, steel doors irising shut. Alarms blared, the ship listed as geomagnetic flux twisted navigation gyros. Naira steadied herself against the flickering console, gaze locked on the stalled countdown. 72 hours late, she thought, but not yet impossible. If they could reach even one alignment node, maybe the pyramid in Bolivia, maybe the still kneeling Colossus, they might coax the engine into a manual restart. Outside, curtains of blood-red aurora slithered toward latitudes that had never known them, heralding a planet on the brink of erasure. Betrayal in St. Peter's shadow. Rome lay sweltering beneath a crimson aurora that should have belonged to polar skies, its ghost light spilling across Renaissance facades like fresh blood on marble. The Vatican's Swiss guards, unnerved by the celestial omen, waved Naira's team through bronze gates that usually required months of diplomatic wrangling. Deep below St. Peter's Basilica, past catacomb corridors lined with saints' bones and pagan sarcophagi, they reached the necropolis, a forbidden warren said to predate Constantine himself. There, amidst torch-yellow halogen lamps and the sweet rot scent of myrrh, stood Monsignor Vittorio Scarpia, keeper of the secret archives. His vestments were ink black save for a crimson stole embroidered with the twin serpent sigil of the custodians, though the threads were so subtle most eyes would miss them. He greeted Naira not with a blessing but with a question spoken in hushed Latin, "Do you seek the gear or the truth, child?" With a flick of ancient switches, Scarpia revealed a subterranean rotunda carved directly beneath the basilica's crossing. The marble floor retracted, exposing an abyss threaded by suspension bridges of gilded iron. At its heart hovered a titanic bronze gear, 40 meters across, suspended by magnetic repulsion over a pit so deep it swallowed the flashlight beams. Each tooth was etched with constellations, yet one quadrant sat motionless, jammed by a crystalline wedge that pulsed with the same color as the rift in the Antarctic Colossus. While Rafa calibrated a portable field driver to nudge the gear into alignment, Scarpia produced a reliquary the size of a music box, its lid inlaid with mother-of-pearl cherubs. He pressed it into Naira's trembling hands. Inside, nestled on silk the hue of dried rose petals, lay a bronze infant footprint no larger than a silver dollar. Micro-inscribed around the heel were the custodian knot and a date matching Naira's birth certificate. Yet the parish listed was an obscure convent in the Hindu Kush, not Tehran as she'd always believed. A vellum slip accompanied it, stamped with papal wax, to be delivered when the engine falters. Naira's pulse thundered in her ears. Adoption rumors had haunted her childhood, but seeing proof, here, beneath the world's holiest dome, appended her very identity. Scarpia's voice softened. You were hidden in plain sight, Signora. The custodian bloodline was meant to pass quietly into history. But now the heirs have fractured, one seeks dominion from the sky, the other stands before me, still deciding the planet's fate. Before she could respond, seismic tremors rattled centuries-old dust from the coffers above. Alarms on Rafa's tablet spiked, magnetospheric collapse accelerating. The frozen gear groaned, its constellations flickering like dying embers. They had minutes, perhaps seconds, to free it. Naira wiped tears she refused to claim as weakness and snapped orders. Secure harnesses, prime the field driver, ready contingency charges. Yet as she stepped onto the swaying catwalk, the reliquary's weight felt heavier than any toolkit, because inside it lay not just a footprint, but the revelation that her veins carried the same ancient mandate Hale had twisted for profit. Far overhead, the basilica's bells began to toll noon, though every clock in Rome read 11:52 a.m. time itself, it seemed, was slipping out of joint, mirroring the gear's stalled rotation. In that liminal chime between hours, Naira chose, the truth could wait, the gear must turn. And with that, she descended into the abyss, footfalls echoing against bronze destined either to restart Earth's heart, or mark the hour of its last breath. Blood Key Ultimatum. The last alignment node, a cyclopean control dais buried 6 kilometers beneath the mid-Atlantic ridge, felt less like a chamber and more like the ventricular cavity of the planet itself. Lava glass walls pulsed with a heartbeat red glow, illuminating glyphs that drifted across the basalt as if projected by the Earth's molten core. In the center stood a monolith of living bronze, its surface veined with liquid light that migrated in sync with Naira's pulse whenever she drew near. At shoulder height, a recess shaped like a human handprint glimmered wetly, waiting. Rafa's silver eyes confirmed what the Vatican Codex had implied, the blood key would only respond to the genome of a true custodian. Hale's sabotage had severed every remote override, this was the master switch. If Naira completed the contact, a chain reaction of torque pistons, mantle resonators, and orbital synchronizers would attempt to re-spin Earth's magnetic dynamo. But the ancient manuals were maddeningly vague about failure modes. Mantle delamination, axial shear, uncontrolled polar discharge. In plain words, the engine might stitch the magnetosphere whole, or crack the planet like an egg. Overhead, the holosphere projected real-time telemetry, Hale's arc fleet drifting out of low orbit, their ion drives painting calligraphic scars across the thermosphere. Radiation alerts spiked amber to crimson as the field sagged, airline pilots were already reporting auroras at 30,000 feet. Each minute of indecision meant another layer of shielding peeled away from the only world that had ever loved them back. As Naira hovered her hand above the print, voices seeped through the basalt, not spoken through air, but vibrating bone and memory. She recognized them, Dr. Sultani, lost at the Nubian Ziggurat, Asha, the linguist swallowed by the pyramid's event horizon, even fragments of the Colossus, rumbling like distant thunder. There is a third cadence, they murmured in overlapping languages. A path uncharted by the engine's gears. It asks for a sacrifice no map records. Images flickered in her mind, constellations rotating into impossible alignments, a bronze footprint dissolving into starlight, the pyramid's levitating plinth splitting to reveal a cavity exactly heart-shaped. Sweat beaded on her fingertips, hovering millimeters from destiny. One choice promised calculated annihilation for billions, the other guaranteed certain annihilation for all, but from a privileged vantage point. The whispered third path was only half imagined, its price and outcome unreadable. Yet in that moment Naira understood why the custodians had hidden their heirs among ordinary cradles. True stewardship demanded the courage to wager oneself, not merely the world. She drew a breath that tasted of iron and magma. Behind her, Rafa disabled his own gauntlet controls, signaling silent faith. Far above, the auroras curdled into 7 spirals, echoing the pyramid's prophecy. Earth was off axis by 7 breaths, and she was about to exhale the 8th. Naira closed her eyes, lowered her palm toward the glowing recess, and chose. Axis of Destiny. The core chamber of the planetary engine was less a room than a singularity of geometry, bronze catwalks twisted in Mobius loops above a sea of molten hematite, while cyclonic currents of ionized air spun so fast they hummed like choirs. At the very center, an altar column of living circuitry rose from the magma, latticed with the same meteor iron veins first glimpsed in Bolivia. Lines of dormant sigils spider-webbed its surface, awaiting a final conductor. Naira stepped onto the altar's narrow dais. Every tremor of the failing magnetosphere echoed through the floor plates, making her bones vibrate like tuning forks. Above, holographic telemetry showed Hale's arc fleet angling for escape velocity, blue engine plumes against a sky streaked crimson by unfiltered solar wind. Time had evaporated. She drew the Vatican reliquary's bronze footprint from her jacket, its metal now warm as skin, and pressed it against the column. A handprint recess bloomed open. Heart-shaped, slick, pulsing faintly. The third path whispered again, not a key, a covenant. With a steadiness she didn't feel, Naira pulled a serrated obsidian shard from her belt. The blade had been chipped off the Midnight Pyramid's levitating plinth, it vibrated with that same sub-audible thrum. One decisive slash across her palm and blood welled dark and shimmering, shot through with microscopic flecks of meteor iron the custodians had seeded in their bloodline millennia ago. She laid her bleeding hand into the recess. The pulse. Blood met bronze. Circuits flared white-hot, racing outward in fractal lightning. A thunderclap boomed, not through air, but through planetary mantle. All at once, magnetic poles flickered like dying stars, north becoming south, south becoming question mark, before collapsing into an eerie stillness. The Antarctic Colossus, half risen and screaming into the void, froze mid-stride. Chains of liquid bronze extruded from the ice itself, snapping back around its chest with the sound of continents grinding. In Bolivia, the black stone pyramid guttered, its cosmic mirror went dark, and the levitating plinth crashed to the floor, inert for the first time in 10,000 years. Above the stratosphere, the ARC station's ion drives hiccuped as guidance arrays lost orientation. One by one they spiraled, engines sputtering, until gravity reclaimed them in silent arcs of falling starlight. And then, absolute silence. No tremor, no wind, no engine hum. Even the magma sea below the dais stilled, glassing over into obsidian. The breath that reset the world. Naira's vision tunneled, the altar siphoned not just her blood but her memories, threading them into the engine's quantum lattice. She felt the planet inhale, a single, colossal breath, and exhale in a tone lower than any earthquake. Somewhere far away, church bells realigned to the correct hour. Aurora curtains folded themselves back toward the poles. Compasses quivered, searching. Her knees buckled. Rafa caught her, silver eyes dimming as the architect's possession ebbed. The pyramid's architect had finished his duty. In the holographic sky above, a new magnetic grid blossomed, lines of force converging not on the Arctic, but in a vast blank swath of the Central Pacific. Final twist. Dawn bled across the horizon. Survey drones, once blinded by flux, now returned crystal clear feeds, mid-ocean waves convulsed around a monolithic island clawing its way from the abyssal plain. Cyclopean pillars of black stone and bronze spiraled skyward, encircling a central statue, a titan carved in volcanic glass. In its upraised stone fist beat a heart of living flesh, tattooed with the twin serpent sigil, Hale's own, still pulsing in defiance of death and gravity.